The family of a Mexican immigrant is demanding answers after an ICE agent shot and killed him during a traffic stop. New video shows the moments after the shooting. You can see 52-year-old Lorenzo Salgado Araujo on the ground, surrounded by agents. The witness who shot this video says that he was screaming in pain and yelling, "Help me, they shot me." A source tells CNN that the man was not actually the target of this ICE operation, even though DHS previously described the incident as a targeted operation. DHS also said he was trying to evade arrest, and he rammed his vehicle into an ICE vehicle and refused to follow commands, and tried to run over an agent before that officer fired in self-defense. Now, DHS tells CNN the officers did not have body cams on, and now Salgado Araujo has lived in the United States for 35 years. He's had no criminal record, and his family says that the officers were following him in unmarked vehicles. He was afraid of being robbed, they said. Salgado Araujo's son spoke recently about the emotional toll that all of this has taken on the family, and he describes the way that he found out that his father had been killed.
I saw a video posted on Facebook that he had been shot. I recognized him immediately. Not from his appearance, but from his voice, crying for help as he lay on the street, bleeding out. He did not deserve to die. He did not deserve to be reduced to a headline of Mexican man shot and killed by ICE.
So this is coming at a moment when ICE is actually bragging that they have surged to 10,000 arrests in 5 days in early July. And they're pushing toward this goal of 2,000 arrests per day. Stephen Miller wants 3,000 arrests per day. And it seems that whenever they're pushing in that direction, we seem to get stories like this.
Well, look, I think they have made efforts to try to get the abuses and excesses of ICE out of the headlines after Minnesota, which was, I think, such an outrage for most Americans when they saw people being killed in the streets of our country. This last case, it's not, again, it's something else that's not happening in a vacuum. It's the latest case that's happened, but there's been now at least 5 people killed by ICE in the streets of America. Ruben Rey Martinez, they killed a young man, they killed in San Padre Island in Texas. Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, Keith Porter, they killed him in LA. Renee Good and Alex Preddy, they killed them in Minnesota. And now Lorenzo Salgado Araujo. There's been
Do you know the names as well of Americans who've been killed by illegal immigrants? Do you have that list?
I know
too?
some of the names. I don't have the list, but I do know some of the names.
What are their names? What are some of their names?
Listen, we have heard all of the names.
No, just what are some of the names?
This is not me doing a contest of whether you know the names or whether I know the names. I want to pronounce these names because I think we need to put names and faces and stories. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
and to the faces of Americans who have been killed by illegal immigrants as well.
The people they killed don't have criminal records.
What are their names?
The people
Laken Riley,
killed.
Jocelyn Nungare, Kate Steinle.
And what are the names of people that have been killed by U.S. citizens?
How is that relevant to this?
Well, you want to start talking about people who've been killed, then let's start talking about people who've been killed in this country. But there's a hell of a lot more people that have been killed by U.S. citizens than people who have been killed by illegal aliens. And that's not what we are talking about right now. We are talking about a government agency that is out of control, killing even American citizens, killing immigrants without a criminal record, that are not the targets of the investigation, lying about it as they have done, and there being no full investigations and accountability.
So the number, according to the AP, that they have for fatalities in these immigration sweeps so far is 8. ICE says in response to that, our message is clear. If you come to our country illegally, we will find you, we will arrest you, and we will deport you. But I don't think that that really addresses why people are dying, because arresting, deporting people who are found to have either violated the law or, whatever, is completely different from people being shot in the streets. And I think the other part of this story is, first of all, we don't have body camera video. It's not clear why they didn't have them, considering that ICE has tens of millions of dollars that has already been appropriated for that purpose. But they've found that officers have lied repeatedly in these incidents. And I think there's a lack of trust here, Scott. That's part of the problem.
Well, I agree with you on the body cams. I think every single federal officer ought to have body cams. I think the president has said he agrees with that. They have money. Every single one of these officers, not just ICE, any federal law enforcement, I think ought to have body cams that would give you instant evidence and instant information. We don't have that here. The details of this are just coming out. I'm kind of in wait and see mode on this because, as you pointed out, we have had instances in the past where something has happened, a story was told, details changed, and so commenting now means you may have to comment differently later. I do think it's tragic anytime anyone loses their life. But if the DHS version of events is true, if someone rammed into a car, didn't obey commands, which I assume they meant put agents' lives in danger, you can imagine how this would have escalated. They are having, one more thing, hundreds of thousands of interactions with illegal aliens all over this country. It is inevitable that you are going to have a few violent instances, and anytime anybody...
So killing people is just the price of doing business.
Let me just play Jemele for you. This is his son talking tonight on Aaron Burnett about why his father might have been afraid of a bunch of unmarked vehicles chasing him down in the street.
There's been instances in the past where his van got stolen and his tools got stolen. So ever since then, he's been very cautious about people following him. He did not know that those vehicles following him were ICE agents. Again, these vehicles were unmarked. They had no emblems, no logos, no flashing lights. There was no way for him to know that they were ICE agents. I know my dad would have stopped had ICE agents formally and clearly identified themselves, at least through their vehicle markings.
That's part of a pattern that we've seen.
Right.
Officers maybe not identifying themselves, and these are dangerous. Traffic stops are always dangerous. It's particularly dangerous when people don't know who's after them.
Well, you brought up and mentioned something a moment ago. I think that's important. It's the lack of trust that people have in this organization that too often behaves recklessly and behaves with a lack of disrespect and care for the citizens that are here. We have seen this movie before where they put out a version of events that once the evidence starts coming in, we see is completely untrue and fabricated. They have lied on people. And it's not just about what they are doing in these particular instances. It's also about the other abuses that we're hearing about, the fact that they've had to remove some of the female detainees because of the rampant sexual abuse that is taking place in some of these detainment facilities. It's a whole picture that Americans are getting that are ugly. And part of what is really disgusting about this entire process is that there is a mentality in this country that because people are here illegally or because there are certain kind of people that it's okay to dehumanize, disrespect, and kill them. Because as you just mentioned a moment ago, Scott, you said, well, they do hundreds of thousands of interactions, and sometimes these things happen. As you said it so casually, like it's just okay to kill people if that's just the price of doing business.
But why?
That's not at all what I said. I just factually stated that anytime you have hundreds of thousands of law enforcement interactions, it is inevitable that not all of them are going to go smoothly. You are going to have situations where violence occurs between officers and the people they're trying to detain. And by the way, in many cases, they are trying to detain and deport extremely violent people. Right. So you're going to have some issues.
The Trump administration's immigration policies are rooted in fear and intimidation, not policies, in my opinion.
Next for us, the East Wing, the Rose Garden, and now the columns on the North Portico. A look at President Trump's newest work site next.